"Sit down," said the Duke of Errington, without turning his head, in the tone of a man who has never once had to say a thing twice. "You are blocking my view of the stage." "Then I am sorry for your view, your grace," said the young woman standing in the aisle of the opera house, in a voice that carried further than she perhaps intended. "But a man is being trampled at your very feet, and I find I care rather more for him than for your entertainment." And she went down on her knees on the marble in her one good gown, in front of the whole glittering assembly. To help the old crossing sweeper the Duke's footman had shoved aside. Julian, Duke of Errington, turned his head then. He was accustomed to a certain effect. When the Duke of Errington entered his box, the tier fell quiet. When he was displeased, gentlemen found reasons to leave. He had cultivated the effect deliberately over 30 years, because a man of his fortune who did not frighten people was a man forever being asked for things. He had come to the opera that night bored, as he came to everything bored, and had been mildly annoyed by a small commotion in the aisle, an old sweeper who had come in out of the cold and collapsed, and the Duke's own liveried men clearing him away like a spill. Julian had not much noticed. And then a girl had refused to sit down. She was nobody. That was plain at a glance to a man trained to read a room. A gown 2 seasons old and carefully mended, no jewels, a chaperone aunt in the row behind gone the colour of ash with mortification. Nobody. And she was kneeling on the marble with her arm around a filthy old man, calling for water, glaring up at a peer of the realm with dark eyes that held not one atom of fear, and saying clear as a bell in the hush she had created, "You might send for your physician, your grace, since you keep one." Or is he also only for the view? The whole tier had stopped breathing. Someone tittered nervously. Julian, Duke of Errington, who could have crushed her family, her prospects, her name, felt something happen in his chest that had not happened in longer than he could remember. It took him a moment to identify it. It was so unfamiliar. He was interested. "My physician," he said, and his own voice sounded strange to him, "is in the 3rd box on the left. Fetch him," he added, to the nearest footman, who fled. Then Julian did a thing that made the entire opera house gasp. He rose from his seat, came down the aisle, and knelt on the marble beside the shabby girl and the old sweeper, in his black superfine and his diamond studs, and put 2 fingers to the old man's throat with the competence of someone who had once, long ago, been a soldier and not merely a duke. "He is only fainted," he said low to her, not to the crowd. "Cold and hunger, not the heart. He will do." He looked up, and their faces were very close, and the dark, fearless eyes were staring at him now with open astonishment which pleased him absurdly. "You may stop glaring at me, madam. We appear to be on the same side." "I did not know dukes had sides," she said. "I thought you had only views." "So did I," said Julian, "until about a minute ago." Her name, he learned, was Marisol Vance. He learned it because he sent his card round to her aunt's modest lodgings the next morning, an event which threw that household into a panic bordering on the medical, and because Marisol, uniquely in his experience, sent it back, returned his card, with a note in a firm hand, thanking his grace for his assistance to the sweeper, whom she had seen settled and fed, and regretting that she was not at home to callers who thought the poor were furniture to be moved aside. Julian read the note 4 times. Then he laughed out loud, alone in his enormous library, a sound the servants had not heard from him in years, and came to the door to investigate. He should, by every rule of his life, have let it go. A duke did not pursue a portionless girl who returned his cards and lectured him about the poor. The world would say she had entrapped him. The world would say a great deal. Julian discovered, examining the matter over the following weeks, that he did not care what the world said, and that this indifference to the good opinion he had spent 30 years cultivating was the single most liberating discovery of his adult life, and that he owed it to a girl on her knees in an opera aisle. So he did not let it go. He laid siege. He found where she walked in the mornings, in the plain public gardens, and arranged to be walking there too, alone, without the entourage, and fell into step beside her. She told him it was improper. He agreed and did not leave. He asked her questions, and this was the astonishing part. This was what undid him. He listened to the answers. She had opinions, this portionless girl, on everything, on the corn laws and the charity schools and the way the parish handled the poor, opinions formed by a life lived near the edge of ruin herself, sharp and just and entirely her own. she argued with him. No one argued with the Duke of Errington. He found he had spent 30 years starving for it. You do this on purpose, she accused him one grey morning, 3 weeks in, stopping on the gravel path. You disagree with me only to keep me talking. I disagree with you, Julian said, when you are wrong, which is seldom, and I keep you talking because your voice is the only thing in London I have wanted to hear in 15 years. Both things are true at once. I am a very efficient man. She flushed and looked away, and he saw with a leap of the heart that the armor of her defiance had a seam in it after all, and that the seam was him. You must not, she said low. You are a duke. I have nothing, whatever you imagine this is. I imagine, he said, that you are the first person in 3 decades to look at me and see a man and not a fortune. You knelt on marble in front of 900 people rather than let an old sweeper be treated as less than a human soul, and you did it without one glance at the peer you were defying. Do you know what that told me, Marisol? He had never used her name before. He watched it land. It told me you would treat a duke exactly the same as a sweeper. No better, no worse, only as a man to be judged by what he does. I have spent my life being flattered and feared. I have never once been simply seen. And I find I cannot go back to the dark now that I know what the light is like. He paused. You may refuse me, but you will not do it by telling me you have nothing, because you have the only thing I have ever lacked. She did refuse him, that morning and the next week and the week after, not of coldness but out of a fierce, wounded pride that would not be bought, and would not be a duke's charity, and could not quite believe a man so far above her meant a word he said. And Julian, who had never in his life had to earn anything, found that he was being made to earn this, and that the earning was remaking him. He learned her aunt's straitened circumstances and did not throw money at them, which she would have flung back. Instead, he found the aunt's estranged brother, a decent man, and quietly reconciled the family so that Marisol's only living kin were restored to her, and he told her nothing of his hand in it, and she wept when the letter came and never guessed. He learned she visited the charity school on Thursdays and taught the children their letters, and he began, without announcement, to fund it, anonymously through the parish, and asked only, once mildly, whether the school had lately found itself better provided for. She said yes, and looked at him hard, and he looked back with his most guileless expression, which was not guileless at all, and she almost smiled. The turning came on a wet Thursday when a small cutting remark from a great lady made loudly and on purpose in a shop where Marisol was buying ribbon she could ill afford, brought the whole cruelty of her position home to her at once. The mended gown, the pointing fingers, the impossibility to it. She left the shop with her chin up and her eyes stinging and walked straight into Julian, who had been, as he was so often now, exactly where she needed him. He saw her face. He did not ask. He simply offered his arm in the open street, before the very lady who had wounded her, and said clearly, Miss Vance, you will forgive me. I have been searching London for you. There is a matter I have delayed too long, and I find I cannot delay it another hour. And the great lady's face, watching the Duke of Errington claim the mended gown girl on his arm in broad daylight, was a thing Marisol would treasure privately for the rest of her days. Society, of course, was scandalized when the Duke of Errington began to appear openly with the mended gown girl from the opera. The drawing rooms hissed. His formidable aunt, the dowager, came in person to remonstrate, and found her nephew immovable, and, after an hour's private conversation with Marisol, who did not flatter her either, went away thoughtful and later became the girl's fiercest champion, for the dowager had always privately despised the flatterers too. There were those who cut Marisol at parties. Julian ended the career of one such gentleman with a single sentence at his club, and afterward the cutting stopped, but he took care that Marisol never knew of it, because she would have scolded him for the misuse of power, and he was learning, slowly, gladly, to deserve her scolding. He proposed to her at the opera. It was, he felt, only just the scene of the crime. He did not take her to his box. He took her, instead, to the aisle, to the very stretch of marble where she had knelt on a night when the house was full and the great and glittering were all in their tears. And there, in front of the assembly that had gasped at her once, the Duke of Errington went down on one knee on the cold stone in his black superfine, as he had done that first night, and the whole opera house fell silent exactly as it had before. I knelt here once beside you, he said, and his low voice carried, because he meant it to, and discovered I had been asleep my whole life until a fearless woman refused to sit down. I have been the coldest man in London. You looked at me and were not afraid, and has ruined me for coldness forever. He took her hand. I do not ask you to become a duchess, Marisol Vance. I ask you to go on doing exactly what you did the night we met, to look at me and see the man, and tell me when I am wrong, and never once let me forget that a sweeper and a duke are the same before God. Marry me. Be the only voice in the world I cannot silence and would never wish to. Say you will. The opera house held its breath, and Marisol Vance, who had faced this man down without flinching the night they met, looked at the Duke of Errington kneeling on the marble before all society, and her fearless dark eyes filled, for the first time, with tears. You dreadful, impossible man, she said, and it carried, and there was laughter now, warm laughter, all through the tears. You have made a scene. I learned it, said Julian, from the best, and when she drew him up to his feet and said yes, the opera house that had gasped at her twice broke instead into applause, for even the great and glittering, it seems, cannot help but cheer when the coldest man among them is at last brought warmly and willingly to his knees. They married that season, and the old crossing sweeper, restored and reclothed and given an honest post at the Errington gate, wept at the wedding and had to be lent 3 handkerchiefs, and the Duke of Errington, who had entered 1,000 rooms board, entered every room after that watching for one face, finding it, and coming alive, for Marisol never did learn to fear him, and he never stopped thanking heaven for it. And to the end of their long life together she would tell anyone who asked that the secret to taming a great and terrible duke was very simple, and she had discovered it by accident on a cold night at the opera. You had only to refuse, however grand he was, to sit down,